11:47 p.m. Security footage shows a pregnant woman being dragged up a marble staircase by her hair. She's screaming, fighting, protecting her 7-month belly with both hands. Her husband, a billionaire, releases her at the top. She falls. Every single step. The impact should have killed her, should have killed the baby, but somehow she survives. Now here's the part that will blow your mind. The security guard standing in the shadows. That's her Navy SEAL brother. He faked his identity, infiltrated the estate, and spent 3 weeks building the perfect rescue plan. Tonight's the night. 2 a.m. extraction, FBI backup ready, safe house waiting. But what her brother doesn't know is that his sister's husband has a secret weapon, a brilliant, ruthless attorney who's been his mistress for 2 years. And she's been reading every encrypted message they've sent. Every single one. The trap is set, and in 3 hours, everything will explode. If your heart is pounding right now, smash that like button. Comment justice if you think Preston deserves everything that's coming. And subscribe because next week's story is even more insane. A woman who discovered her husband had a second family, so she invited the other wife to Thanksgiving dinner. What happened next? You have to see it to believe it. The security footage showed everything in stark black and white. Timestamp, 11:47 at night. Night vision cameras captured Preston Whitmore III in his $15,000 tuxedo, his hand twisted deep in his pregnant wife's auburn hair. Cassandra Morgan Whitmore screamed as he dragged her upward. 23 marble steps. She fought him every inch, her hands protecting the 7-month swell of her belly. Her bare feet scrambled for purchase on the cold stone, but Preston's grip never loosened. At the top landing, he released her. She fell. Her body struck each step on the way down, shoulder, hip, back. She tried to curl around her stomach, tried to protect the baby, but gravity and marble showed no mercy. The crystal chandelier above tinkled softly as her impact sent vibrations through the mansion's bones. She landed on the first-floor landing in a crumpled heap, still curled around her pregnant belly. Blood trickled from her temple. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Preston descended the stairs slowly, straightening his platinum cufflinks. He stepped over her body without looking down. "Clean yourself up," he said. "Guests arrive in 2 hours." His Italian leather shoes clicked away across the foyer's polished floor. The camera angle shifted. In the shadows beneath the grand staircase, a security guard stood with his fists clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. His jaw muscle twitched. Rage burned in his dark eyes as he watched Preston disappear into his study. The guard's name tag read, Mike Turner. He took one step toward the fallen woman, then stopped. Forced himself to remain in position. His whole body vibrated with the effort of staying still. On the floor, Cassandra pushed herself to her hands and knees. She pressed one palm to her belly, waiting. After a moment, she felt the baby kick. Relief washed over her bruised face. The security guards saw it too, saw her relief, saw her struggle to stand, saw her wipe the blood from her temple with the back of her hand and straighten her torn evening gown. She limped toward the servants' staircase, one hand on the wall for support, the other cradling her stomach. The guard watched until she disappeared. Then he pulled out his phone and typed a single message. "It's worse than we thought." The screen went black. 72 hours earlier, the Whitmore Foundation annual gala transformed the Connecticut estate into something from a fairy tale. 200 guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos mingled beneath strings of crystal lights. A 12-piece orchestra played Vivaldi. Champagne flowed from a fountain carved from ice. Cassandra stood beside her husband in an emerald silk gown that had cost more than her old teacher's salary for an entire year. The dress had been tailored to accommodate her pregnant belly, but Preston still complained it made her look frumpy. His hand rested on the small of her back. To anyone watching, it looked affectionate, supportive even. Only Cassandra felt how hard his fingers pressed into her spine, controlling exactly where she could move. "Preston, darling," a woman in diamonds approached. "You must introduce me to your lovely wife." "This is Cassandra," Preston said. His fingers dug deeper into her back. "She used to teach kindergarten before I rescued her from that life." The society women laughed. Cassandra smiled on cue, the expression she had practiced 1,000 times in the mirror. How wonderful, the Diamond Woman cooed. And when is the baby due? 8 weeks, Cassandra said softly. Do you know what you're having? Preston answered before she could. A daughter, Rose Eleanor Whitmore. Under the table, Preston found Cassandra's hand. He squeezed her fingers until the bones ground together. She didn't flinch. She had learned not to flinch. Excuse me, Cassandra murmured. I need to use the ladies' room. Preston's grip tightened for just a moment, a warning before he released her. Don't be long. The bathroom was blessedly empty. Cassandra locked herself in the largest stall and leaned against the marble wall, breathing slowly through her nose. The baby kicked, protesting the stress hormones flooding Cassandra's system. I know, sweet girl, Cassandra whispered, pressing her palm to her belly. I know. I'm sorry. She pulled concealer from her clutch and studied herself in the mirror. The bruises on her upper arm from 3 days ago had faded to yellow-green. Foundation covered them easily. The tender spot on her scalp where Preston had yanked her hair that morning didn't show at all. She was getting better at this. 3 years of practice had made her an expert in hiding the evidence. The bathroom door opened. Cassandra quickly applied powder, forcing her hands to steady. Eleanor Whitmore entered, Preston's mother, 65 years old and elegant as a knife blade. She checked her lipstick in the mirror beside Cassandra. The Vanderbilts are asking about the baby, Eleanor said without preamble. Try to sound more enthusiastic when you answer them. Of course, Eleanor. Eleanor studied her in the mirror. For just a moment, something flickered in the older woman's eyes. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. My husband was difficult too, Eleanor said quietly. I learned to manage. So will you. She left, heels clicking away on Italian tile. Cassandra stared at her reflection, wondering when she had stopped recognizing the woman looking back. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Preston had passed out drunk in his study, Cassandra locked herself in her bedroom. She pulled out her laptop, fingers trembling as she initiated the video call. Marcus's face appeared on screen, pixelated slightly from the military satellite connection. He was somewhere in the Middle East, somewhere he couldn't tell her, wearing desert camouflage and sporting a new scar above his left eyebrow. Hey, little sister, he said, grinning. Then his smile faded. Cass, what's wrong? Nothing. Everything's fine. I just wanted to see your face. Marcus leaned closer to his camera. His eyes, the same dark brown as hers, studied her with the intensity that had made him one of the Navy's top SEAL operatives. You've lost weight, he said. Your eyes look tired. Your smile isn't reaching your face. Talk to me. I'm pregnant. Of course I'm tired. And I'm smiling. See? She demonstrated. Cassandra Marie Morgan. He used her maiden name deliberately. I've known you for 28 years. You can't lie to me. What's he doing to you? Footsteps in the hallway. Preston's office was directly below her bedroom. If he heard her voice, Marcus, I really can't talk right now. I love you. Stay safe. Cass, wait. She closed the laptop, heart pounding. The footsteps passed her door. She exhaled slowly. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. I'm coming home soon. We'll fix this. She deleted the message immediately. Preston monitored her phone. He monitored everything. The next day, Cassandra met her best friend Rebecca Walsh for lunch at an outdoor cafe. Preston had approved the meeting, but limited it to 1 hour exactly. Becca was already seated, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore scrubs under her jacket. She'd come straight from her shift at the hospital emergency room. You canceled on me 4 times this month, Becca said as soon as Cassandra sat down. What's going on? Just pregnancy exhaustion. It's been... Stop! Becca's voice was gentle but firm. Cass, I'm an ER nurse. I've treated hundreds of domestic violence victims. I know what defensive injuries look like. Cassandra's hand instinctively moved to her wrist, where fingerprint bruises had been visible 2 weeks ago. The bruises on your wrist last month, Becca continued. The way you flinched when that waiter walked past. The fact that you check your phone every 30 seconds like you're on a timer. I'm not blind. I told you I tripped carrying groceries. I'm clumsy when I'm pregnant. Please don't lie to me. Not you, not after everything we've been through together. Cassandra's phone buzzed. Preston, where are you? She stood up, leaving money on the table. I have to go. I'm sorry, Becca. Please don't call me again. Cass, but she was already walking away, one hand protectively over her belly, tears streaming down her face. Becca watched her go, then pulled out her phone. She scrolled through old photos on social media until she found what she was looking for, a picture from Cassandra's wedding. In the background, Cassandra's brother Marcus in his Navy dress uniform. Becca found his contact information through mutual friends. She sent a message. "This is Becca Walsh, Cass's friend from college. We need to talk about your sister. I think he's going to kill her." 3 days later, everything changed. Preston stood in the mansion's great room watching the morning news. A whiskey glass shook in his hand. "Federal investigators have launched a probe into Whitmore Foundation finances," the reporter said. "Sources close to the investigation suggest as much as $17 million in charitable donations may have been misappropriated." The glass shattered against the wall, whiskey and crystal exploding across antique wallpaper. $17 million. Preston's voice was deadly quiet. "They think I stole $17 million. Cassandra stood frozen in the doorway, one hand on her pregnant belly. Preston turned to her. His face was red, veins bulging in his forehead. "This is your fault, your neediness, your constant demands for attention. I've been distracted by managing you when I should have been watching the business." "Preston, I never—" His open palm caught her across the face. The impact sent her stumbling backward. She hit the floor hard, instinctively curling to protect her stomach. "Get up." He stood over her, fists clenched. "We're firing the entire security team. Someone talked to the FBI. Someone in this house betrayed me." She scrambled to her feet, tasting blood where her teeth had cut her lip. "I want them all gone by tonight," Preston continued. "Every guard, every maid, every driver. All of them. I'm bringing in new people. People I can trust." He walked away, already on his phone, barking orders. Cassandra touched her split lip gingerly. The baby kicked hard, responding to her elevated heart rate. She whispered to her unborn daughter, "I'm sorry, Rose. Mama's so sorry." 2,000 miles away, Marcus read Becca's message for the 15th time. Then he walked into his commanding officer's quarters and requested emergency family leave. "How long?" the commander asked. 2 weeks. "Make it count, Morgan." Marcus packed his gear, his jaw set in a hard line. He had failed to protect his little sister once. He wouldn't fail again. On the flight back to Connecticut, he made a single phone call to a contact from a previous operation. "I need a favor. A big one." 48 hours later, a fleet of black SUVs pulled through the gates of the Whitmore estate. The new security team had arrived. The head of the new security detail introduced himself as Mike Turner. He stood 6 feet 2 inches tall with the rigid posture of military training. Dark hair, clean-shaven, a scar above his left eyebrow. His references were impeccable. Former Navy, specialized in executive protection, highly recommended by 3 separate private security firms. Eleanor Whitmore reviewed his file in the estate's library. "Your credentials are impressive, Mr. Turner. My husband personally vetted you himself." "I appreciate the opportunity, ma'am," Mike said. His voice was carefully neutral, professional. "You'll be heading the personal protection detail. That includes my son, my daughter-in-law, and my granddaughter when she arrives." Eleanor handed back the file. "My son is under considerable stress currently. Federal investigations, business pressures. He requires discretion above all else." "Understood, ma'am." "Good. You start immediately. The staff will show you to your quarters." Mike nodded and left. Eleanor watched him go, then returned to her tea and her carefully maintained ignorance. Cassandra stood at her bedroom window, watching the new security team survey the property. She counted 6 guards, all moving with military precision. They walked the perimeter, checked sight lines, installed additional cameras. One guard in particular caught her attention. The tall one with the scar. Something about the way he moved triggered a memory she couldn't quite place. He turned, and for just a moment, his eyes met hers across the distance. Cassandra's breath caught. That scar. Baseball accident, summer before 7th grade. She had accidentally hit him with an aluminum bat during a backyard game. The cut had required 12 stitches. No, it couldn't be. Marcus was deployed overseas. She had video called him just 4 days ago. He was in the desert, somewhere classified, somewhere dangerous. This guard just looked similar. That was all. Coincidence. but her hands were shaking. That night, Preston insisted Cassandra join him for dinner with Graham, his father. The older man sat at the head of the table, 78 years old and still radiating authority. He had been a federal judge for 30 years before retiring. The FBI investigation is a nuisance, nothing more, Graham said, cutting his steak with surgical precision. I've already spoken with former colleagues. This will disappear within the month. What about the subpoenas? Preston asked. Leave that to Victoria. She's handling everything. Cassandra pushed food around her plate, trying to be invisible. How are you feeling, Cassandra? Graham asked suddenly. She looked up, startled. Graham rarely acknowledged her existence. Fine, thank you. The baby is healthy? Yes, the doctor says everything is progressing normally. Good. Whitmore heirs are precious. We must protect our legacy. He returned to his steak, dismissing her again. After dinner, Cassandra escaped to the kitchen. It was the only room Preston never entered, deeming it beneath him. She poured herself a glass of water with shaking hands. Ma'am, is everything all right? She spun around. Mike Turner stood in the doorway, hands clasped professionally in front of him. I'm fine, just getting water. Of course, I was just conducting a final security check before the overnight shift. He moved to the back door, testing the lock. Cassandra's phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. Unknown number. The text message read, It's me, Cass. Don't react, I'm here. 2 weeks. We get you out. Delete this message. Her hand trembled so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Mike Turner was still checking locks, his back to her. Professional, detached, just doing his job. But she knew that scar. She knew the way he stood. She knew the slight favor he gave his left knee where he had torn his ACL during SEAL training. Mr. Turner, she said quietly. He turned. Yes, ma'am? For a moment, their eyes met. Brother and sister, separated by 3 years of abuse and a cover story and the desperate need to maintain appearances. Thank you, she whispered, for being so thorough with security. Just doing my job, ma'am. You should get some rest. Growing a baby is hard work. Something in the way he said it, the same phrase their mother had used when Cassandra was pregnant the first time, the pregnancy she had lost before marrying Preston, made tears spring to her eyes. Good night, Mr. Turner. Good night, ma'am. She left the kitchen, deleted the text message, and climbed the stairs to her room. Inside, she locked the door and slid down it, sitting on the floor with her knees pulled up as much as her pregnant belly allowed. Marcus was here. Her brother was here. For the first time in 3 years, Cassandra allowed herself to feel something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. 2 blocks from the Whitmore estate, Victoria Sterling sat in her car reviewing security camera footage on her laptop. She had access to every feed in the mansion, courtesy of the previous security team she had paid off before Preston fired them. She watched the kitchen scene 3 times. Watched Cassandra's face when she read the message. Watched the way Mike Turner's shoulders tensed almost imperceptibly when Cassandra thanked him. Victoria picked up her phone and dialed stun. Graham, it's Victoria. We have a problem. Explain. The new security guard, Mike Turner, he's not who he claims to be. I personally vetted his background. Everything checked out. Background checks can be faked if you know the right people, and Navy SEALs definitely know the right people. She zoomed in on the security footage, capturing Mike Turner's face. Run a facial recognition scan. I think this is Marcus Morgan. Silence on the other end of the line. Then her brother? The one currently supposed to be deployed in Afghanistan, the Navy SEAL who has been very interested in his sister's well-being. Victoria smiled. He's here to rescue her. Can you prove it? I will by morning. But Graham, this is perfect. How so? We let him think he's in control, let him build a rescue plan. Then we destroy it, and we destroy Cassandra's last hope in the process. After that, she'll be completely broken, compliant. She'll sign whatever divorce papers we put in front of her and disappear without a custody fight. Graham was quiet for a long moment. Victoria, you understand what I'm paying you for. $500,000 a year to protect your family's interests, which includes making sure Preston's first marriage ends cleanly so he can marry someone more suitable to the Whitmore name. And you're still interested in that position? Victoria glanced at the photo on her dashboard. Preston Whitmore at a charity event, handsome and powerful and completely under her control. Very interested. Then proceed, but carefully. Marcus Morgan is a decorated Navy SEAL. He's dangerous. So am I. She hung up and opened a new file on her laptop. The header read, Cassandra Morgan, Extraction Countermeasures. Victoria began typing. She had been preparing for this moment for 6 months, ever since Becca Walsh started asking too many questions, and Victoria started monitoring all of Cassandra's communications. Everything was proceeding exactly according to plan. At midnight, Cassandra's bedroom door lock clicked open from the outside. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, until she saw the figure slip inside. Marcus raised a finger to his lips, then pulled a small device from his pocket. He activated it, and a faint humming filled the air. Audio jammer, he whispered. We have 5 minutes before the overnight guard does his rounds. Cassandra launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around her brother as tightly as her pregnant belly would allow. He held her, and she felt him shaking with suppressed rage. I'm sorry, she sobbed into his shoulder. I'm so sorry. I should have told you sooner. I should have. Shh. None of this is your fault. Not 1 second of it. He pulled back, hands on her shoulders, studying her face. Even in the dark, he saw everything. The weight loss, the shadows under her eyes, the way she held herself like she was trying to take up less space. Becca called me 6 months ago, Marcus said quietly. I've been planning this ever since. 6 months? I couldn't just show up and drag you out. Not with Preston's resources, his connections. We needed a real plan. He pulled out his phone, showing her files. I've been working with someone, a lawyer named Victor Sullivan. He used to work for the Whitmore firm. Used to? He quit last year after discovering how much money Preston was embezzling. He's been gathering evidence ever since. The FBI investigation? Victor initiated it. Cassandra stared at the phone screen. Medical records from 4 different hospitals, emergency room visits, broken ribs, concussion, bruises photographed and documented. How did you get these? Becca, she's been compiling everything for months. Every injury she saw, every visit you made to different ERs, thinking Preston wouldn't track a pattern if you spread it out. Marcus's jaw was tight. He's going to prison, Cass. I promise you that. The baby too. We have a plan. He showed her photos of a house, small, safe, anonymous. There's a safe house 40 miles north. Victor has a legal team ready, but I need you to do something first. What? I need you to gather more evidence. Recordings of Preston's threats, documentation of the embezzlement, anything that will make the case airtight. Boy, Cassandra's hands were shaking again. If he finds out, he won't. I installed new security systems. I control the cameras now. I'll know if he suspects anything. Marcus pulled out a small device, no bigger than a button. Audio recorders, military grade. Put them in his office, the bedroom, anywhere he talks about the business or about you. They'll transmit directly to an encrypted server. Marcus, if this goes wrong, it won't. 2 weeks, Cass. I get you evidence Victor files for emergency custody and protective orders, and we extract you before Preston knows what's happening. The FBI will arrest him the same day. For the first time in 3 years, Cassandra felt something other than fear and resignation. How do I contact you? He handed her a burner phone, smaller than a deck of cards. Hidden in plain sight, put it in a box of tampons or pads. Preston won't look there. She almost laughed. It was such a perfectly practical Marcus solution. Check it twice a day. Morning shower, and at night after he's in his office with his whiskey. Marcus pulled her into another hug. We're going to get you out of here. You and Rose both. Rose? Of course I know her name. You think I'm not keeping track of my niece? He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen in years. 2 weeks, little sister. Then you're free. After he left, Cassandra sat on her bed with the burner phone and the tiny recording devices. She pressed a hand to her belly, where Rose was kicking. Did you hear that, baby girl? She whispered. Uncle Marcus is here. We're going to be okay. For the first time since marrying Preston Whitmore, Cassandra Morgan allowed herself to believe it. Over the next 4 days, Cassandra planted the recording devices exactly as Marcus instructed. The first one went under Preston's desk while he attended a meeting downtown with his attorneys. Her hand shook as she pressed the adhesive backing to the underside of the mahogany wood, but it held. But it, the second device went under the dining room table, positioned to catch dinner conversations with Graham. The third went into the master bedroom, behind the nightstand where Preston kept his second cell phone, the one he thought she didn't know about. Each placement felt like a small victory. Each successful mission made her breathe a little easier. The devices recorded everything. I don't care what the FBI wants. Preston's voice came through clear on the encrypted server Marcus monitored. Destroy the offshore account records, all of them. If they can't prove where the money went, they can't make a case. What about the Foundation's board? Graham's voice, calm and measured. They're asking questions. Let them ask. Victoria's handling it. She's been covering our tracks for 2 years. The board won't find anything. Cassandra listened to the playback on the burner phone that night, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of sadness, tears of righteous fury. They were going to prison. Both of them. She would make sure of it. Becca visited under the guise of a home health nurse that Preston's insurance company had arranged. Victoria had approved it herself, thinking it would make Cassandra more compliant if she had some supervised contact with her friend. They sat in Cassandra's bedroom while Becca checked her blood pressure and listened to the baby's heartbeat with a portable monitor. 140/90, Becca said quietly, showing Cassandra the reading. That's preeclampsia range, Cass. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. The stress is going to kill you or Rose or both of you if this continues much longer. Becca pulled out her tablet, documenting everything. I've compiled your medical records from every emergency room visit in the past 2 years. 4 hospitals, 12 visits, pattern of escalating injuries. She showed Cassandra the timeline. Bruised ribs, sprained wrist, concussion. Each visit at a different hospital, each with Cassandra's carefully constructed explanation. I tripped on the stairs. I fell in the shower. I slipped on ice. They'll say I'm clumsy, Cassandra whispered. Not when I testify about injury patterns. Not when I explain how domestic violence victims deliberately go to different hospitals to avoid creating a trackable pattern. Becca gripped her hand. Cass, you're going to survive this. Marcus has a plan. Victor has the legal framework ready, and I have the medical evidence. We've got you. A knock at the door made them both jump. Eleanor entered without waiting for permission. The nurse visit is over, she said coldly. Miss Walsh, you may go. Becca gathered her equipment, squeezing Cassandra's hand once more before leaving. Eleanor watched her go, then turned to Cassandra. You should be more careful about who you trust. Becca's my friend. Friends are a luxury you can't afford right now. My son is under tremendous pressure. The FBI investigation, the foundation audit, all of it. He needs a supportive wife, not one who brings strange nurses into his home. Cassandra felt the familiar numbness settling over her, the emotional shutdown that had become her default state. Of course, Eleanor. I'll be more supportive. After Eleanor left, Cassandra checked the burner phone. A message from Marcus. Got the recordings. Preston's talking about offshore accounts in Cayman Islands. Victor says that's exactly what we needed. 6 more days. 6 more days. She could survive 6 more days. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling Rose kick. Just 6 more days, baby girl. Then we're free. But Preston found the device. Cassandra was bringing his morning coffee, a ritual he insisted on, her serving him like some kind of medieval servant, when she saw it sitting on his desk. The small black recorder, no bigger than a button, sitting in the center of his leather desk pad. Her blood turned to ice. What is this, Cassandra? She forced herself to breathe normally. I don't know, maybe the cleaning staff. He moved faster than she expected. His hand closed around her throat, slamming her backward into the bookshelf. Law books rained down around them. You're spying on me? His face was inches from hers, red with rage, spittle flying. While the FBI crawls up my ass, you're putting fucking bugs in my office? She couldn't breathe. His fingers crushed her windpipe. She clawed at his hands, trying to pry them loose, but he was too strong. Black spots danced in her vision. The baby kicked, hard and desperate. Preston felt it against his body and suddenly released her. Cassandra collapsed to the floor, gasping and choking. Her hand went instinctively to her belly, checking, always checking. Preston stood over her, chest heaving. I will make you lose that baby. Do you understand me? One more step out of line, one more betrayal, and I'll push you down those stairs myself. No one will question it. Pregnant women are clumsy. He left her there on the floor, surrounded by fallen books, struggling to breathe. She managed to crawl to the bathroom and lock the door. Her throat was already bruising, fingerprints visible in the mirror. She splashed cold water on her face and tried to slow her racing heart. The cramping started 10 minutes later. Sharp pains in her lower abdomen, radiating outward. She pressed her hands to her belly, whispering desperately, "No, no, no, please, Rose. Please stay with me." She managed to reach the burner phone and send a message to Becca. Something's wrong. Becca arrived within the hour carrying her medical bag and claiming to be following up on the previous day's visit. Preston was locked in his study and didn't interfere. In Cassandra's bedroom, Becca examined her with practiced efficiency. Blood pressure, fetal heart rate, physical exam. The baby's heartbeat is irregular, Becca said quietly, showing Cassandra the monitor readout. Not critical yet, but concerning. You're experiencing extreme stress. Your body is pumping out cortisol and adrenaline. If this continues, I can't leave yet. Marcus needs more time. The evidence, Cass, you might not have more time. Becca's eyes were fierce. Your blood pressure is 145/95. That's dangerous. If you develop full eclampsia, you could have seizures. You could die. Rose could die. 6 more days. That's all Marcus needs. You might not have 6 more days. But Cassandra had survived this long. She could have survived 6 more days. She had to. That night, Preston had dinner with Victoria in the formal dining room. Cassandra served them herself, another of his new humiliating requirements. She set down plates of herb-crusted salmon and roasted vegetables, and then stood in the corner like a servant, waiting to be dismissed. The FBI is requesting additional financial records, Victoria said, cutting her salmon with surgical precision. I've filed for extensions on all of them. We have another month before we need to produce anything. Will that be enough time? To move the money and obscure the trail? Yes, I've already contacted our associates in the Caymans. The offshore accounts will be untraceable by the time the FBI gets their warrant. Preston reached across the table and took Victoria's hand. What would I do without you? Probably go to prison. She smiled. Good thing you have me. They both laughed. Cassandra stood in the corner, invisible and silent, memorizing every word. The recording device under the table was capturing everything, but she wanted to remember this moment. The moment she realized Preston's attorney and his mistress were the same person. How long had it been going on? Months? Years? That will be all, Cassandra, Preston said without looking at her. You may go. She left the room and went straight to her bedroom. She checked the burner phone. The device had transmitted the entire conversation to Marcus's encrypted server. His response came immediately. Victoria Sterling, I should have known. Corporate attorney, specializes in making criminal evidence disappear. This is good, Cass. This gives us leverage. How? She's part of the conspiracy now. Obstruction of justice. When Preston goes down, she goes down with him. Cassandra sat on the edge of her bed, one hand on her belly. Did you hear that, Rose? They're all going to pay for what they've done. The baby kicked in response. The extraction was planned for 2 in the morning 6 days later. Marcus had it choreographed down to the second. Cassandra would sneak out through the servants' entrance at exactly 2:07 when the guard rotation created a 15-second gap in coverage. Marcus would be waiting at the service road, 100 yards from the main house. Becca would be driving, ready to transport them to the safe house. Victor had the legal paperwork ready to file the moment they reached safety. Emergency protective order, emergency custody hearing, FBI warrants for Preston's arrest. Everything was prepared. Cassandra packed a go-bag with documents, the small amount of cash Becca had smuggled to her, and one photo of her parents. She hid it under a loose floorboard in her closet. At 1:55 in the morning, she dressed in dark clothes, moved silently through the bedroom, avoiding the creaky floorboards she had memorized over 3 years of captivity. At 2:05, she crept down the servants' staircase, her pregnant belly making the descent awkward but manageable. At 2:07, she slipped out the servants' entrance. Marcus was waiting exactly where he promised, dressed all in black, his face tight with focus. He took her hand, and they ran, as fast as a 7-month pregnant woman could run, toward the service road. She could see Becca's car, headlights off, waiting in the darkness, 50 yards away, 40 yards, 30 yards. 20 floodlights exploded to life, turning night into day. 6 police cars blocked the road, light bars flashing red and blue. Preston stepped out of the lead vehicle. Next to him, Victoria Sterling smiled like a shark. Graham emerged from the second car, his face impassive. "No," Cassandra whispered. "No, no, no." Victoria held up a tablet. "Did you really think military-grade encryption was unbreakable? I specialize in corporate digital forensics. I've read every message you two have sent for the past 3 weeks." Marcus pushed Cassandra behind him, his body a shield. "I'm her brother. I'm trying to save her from an abuser." Graham stepped forward. "Officers, that's the man. The trespasser who's been stalking my daughter-in-law. We filed a complaint 3 days ago." "That's a lie," Marcus shouted. "I'm Marcus Morgan. Her brother, I'm—" 4 police officers tackled him. He fought back, training taking over, but they outnumbered him. They forced him to the ground, wrenched his arms behind his back, locked handcuffs around his wrists. "Cass, run!" Marcus screamed, fighting against the officers holding him down. But Preston's hand was already in her hair, yanking her backward. She stumbled, trying to protect her belly as he dragged her away from her brother. Becca's car was still there, engine running. Victoria walked over to it, tapped on the window. Becca rolled it down, tears streaming down her face. "Leave now," Victoria said pleasantly, "or you're arrested as an accomplice to trespassing and attempted kidnapping." "Cass!" Becca sobbed. "Go!" Marcus shouted from the ground, 4 officers pinning him down. "Becca, go! Tell Victor!" One of the officers forced his face into the pavement, cutting off his words. Becca's car peeled away, taillights disappearing into the darkness. Preston dragged Cassandra back toward the mansion, his fist tight in her auburn hair. She could hear Marcus still fighting, still shouting her name, as the police forced him into their cruiser. Victoria walked beside them, her heels clicking on the pavement. "Welcome home, Cassandra. I think we need to have a conversation about trust." Behind them, police cars pulled away, taking Marcus with them. Cassandra's last hope disappeared into the night. They locked her in the master bedroom. Cassandra hadn't even realized it was possible to lock the door from the outside, but apparently Preston had installed the mechanism years ago. For security purposes, he claimed, in case of a home invasion. The truth was clear now. This room had always been designed as a cage. She pounded on the door until her fists were bruised. She screamed until her voice went hoarse. No one came. At 8 in the morning, Eleanor slid a breakfast tray through a slot in the door that Cassandra also hadn't known existed. Toast, eggs, orange juice, like she was an animal in a zoo. "This is for your own safety, dear," Eleanor said through the door, her voice muffled, but clear. "You've proven you can't be trusted." "Eleanor, please. I'm pregnant. I need to see a doctor. You'll have everything you need, but you need to understand your position now." The slot closed. Footsteps retreated down the hallway. Cassandra slid down the door, sitting on the floor with her knees drawn up as much as her pregnant belly allowed. She pressed her hands to her stomach, feeling Rose kick. "I'm sorry, baby girl," she whispered. "Mama's so sorry. I tried. I really tried." At noon, Preston entered the bedroom. Cassandra scrambled to her feet, backing away from him instinctively. But he wasn't alone. Victoria Sterling followed him inside, dressed in a sharp gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase. "Sit down, Cassandra," Preston said. She remained standing. "Sit down." The tone of his voice left no room for argument. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands protectively over her belly. Victoria circled her slowly like a predator studying prey. "You know who I am, of course. Victoria Sterling. I've been Preston's attorney for 3 years." She paused, letting that sink in. "And his lover for 2. Cassandra's stomach dropped. She had suspected, but hearing it confirmed was different. Victoria smiled. "Did you wonder how Preston always knew your moves? How he found your therapist's phone number that you thought you'd hidden so well? How he knew about the bank account Becca helped you open last year. She opened her briefcase and pulled out thick folders. I've been monitoring everything, every phone call, every email, every text message, every secret meeting. She spread the documents across the bed, screenshots of Cassandra's messages to Becca, transcripts of phone calls to domestic violence hotlines, bank statements showing the account with $73 that Cassandra had been slowly building toward an escape fund. Your brother's evidence? Victoria continued. I corrupted the files he sent to the FBI. They're worthless now. Victor Sullivan, he was disbarred this morning for ethics violations. Becca Walsh, her nursing license is under investigation for HIPAA violations, accessing patient records she shouldn't have, specifically yours from all those different hospitals. Cassandra felt the room spinning. Why would you do this? Because Graham pays me $500,000 a year to protect this family's interests. Victoria's smile was cold. And you, sweetheart, are a threat to those interests. Preston stood behind Victoria, arms crossed, watching Cassandra's face as hope died. But why? Cassandra whispered. If you want Preston, just take him. I'll sign divorce papers. I'll disappear. Just let me take my daughter and... Your daughter? Graham's voice came from the doorway. Cassandra hadn't even heard him enter. The older man walked into the bedroom, hands clasped behind his back. Rose is not your daughter, Cassandra. Rose is a Whitmore, and Whitmore children belong with the Whitmore family. She's inside my body. I'm carrying her. She's mine. Graham pulled a document from his jacket pocket. This is a paternity test we conducted last month using amniocentesis. Cassandra's blood ran cold. You did what? Dr. Hayes performed it during one of your routine checkups. You signed the consent form. He showed her the paperwork, her signature at the bottom, though she had no memory of signing it. The DNA test proves Preston is the biological father, which means Rose is legally a Whitmore heir. It was a lie. It had to be a lie, but the document looked official, notarized, stamped with medical office letterhead. The prenuptial agreement you signed when you married Preston was very clear, Graham continued. Victoria wrote it herself. You have no rights to community property, no claim to assets, and no primary custody claim to any children of the marriage. That's not possible. Family courts favor mothers. Under normal circumstances, yes. Victoria stepped closer. But you are not a normal mother, are you, Cassandra? You're mentally unstable. You attempted suicide 3 months ago. What? I never... Victoria pulled out another document. Medical report from St. Mary's Hospital. Overdose of sleeping pills. Cassandra Morgan Whitmore found unconscious by her husband, rushed to emergency room, stomach pumped. I was never at St. Mary's Hospital, Cassandra shouted. This is fake. All of this is fake. It's notarized by a licensed physician, filed with the state medical board. It's in the system. Victoria's smile widened. Try to fight it in court. See how far you get. Cassandra looked at Preston, her husband, the man she had once believed she loved. How can you do this? She's our daughter. She's a Whitmore, Preston said simply. That's all that matters. Victoria pulled out one final document. Sign over temporary custody to Preston. Or we induce labor today and you never see Rose again. She's not due for 8 more weeks. Premature births happen all the time. Doctors will testify that the stress of your mental illness endangered the pregnancy. Victoria set a pen on top of the papers. You have 60 seconds to decide. Cassandra looked around the room. Preston, impassive. Victoria, triumphant. Graham, cold as stone. Eleanor standing in the hallway, tears on her face but saying nothing. No allies, no help, no hope. And Rose, kicking inside her, dependent on Cassandra's body for survival. If I sign, you'll let the pregnancy continue? Until at least 35 weeks. That's only 2 weeks early. Perfectly safe. Cassandra picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold it. I'm sorry, Rose, she whispered. She signed. They moved her to a different bedroom the next day. Smaller, more isolated, in a wing of the house she had never entered before. This room had bars on the windows. Dr. Hayes visited daily to monitor the pregnancy. She was professional, efficient, and completely under the Whitmore family's control. Blood pressure is still too high, she said, wrapping the cuff away. We need to manage your stress levels. My stress levels, Cassandra laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. I'm locked in a room against my will, separated from everyone I care about, and you want me to relax? I'm prescribing anti-anxiety medication. No, nothing that could hurt the baby. This is safe for pregnancy. It will help you. Dr. Hayes prepared a syringe. Roll up your sleeve. I said no. Two large men entered the room. Security guards Cassandra didn't recognize. They held her arms while Dr. Hayes administered the injection. Just vitamins and mild sedatives, the doctor said, for your own good. The medication hit her system within minutes. The world became soft around the edges. The panic in her chest dulled to a distant ache. She hated it, hated the numbness, the way her thoughts moved through molasses, the way she couldn't quite hold on to her rage. But it was better than the alternative, better than them inducing labor and taking Rose immediately. So she stopped fighting. She took the pills they gave her. She ate the meals they brought. She sat by the barred window and watched the seasons change outside. Days blurred together. 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. At 35 weeks pregnant, they induced labor. Dr. Hayes set up a private medical room in the mansion's east wing. Equipment rolled in that looked like it belonged in a hospital. Monitors, IV stands, an incubator waiting in the corner. We'll start Pitocin to induce contractions, Dr. Hayes said, inserting the IV into Cassandra's arm. No epidural, we need you alert. Alert for what? For the psychiatric evaluation that will determine your fitness as a mother. Victoria entered the room, tablet in hand. I'll be documenting everything. How you handle pain, how you respond to stress, whether you show appropriate emotional responses to your child's birth. This is insane. This is legal. Victoria pulled up a chair, made herself comfortable. Now, let's see how you do. The Pitocin took effect within an hour. Contractions started, mild at first, then rapidly intensifying. No pain medication, no comfort. Just wave after wave of agony, while Victoria took notes and Preston watched through a glass window like Cassandra was an exhibit in a zoo. 12 hours of labor. Cassandra screamed. She begged for pain relief. She sobbed. She prayed. Eleanor finally appeared around hour 10, standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. But she didn't intervene. She never intervened. At 3:17 in the morning, Rose Eleanor Whitmore entered the world crying and pink and perfect. A nurse immediately took her from the room. Wait, Cassandra gasped, trying to sit up. Let me hold her, please. I haven't even touched her. Dr. Hayes pushed her back down. She needs NICU observation, premature birth complications. She's crying. She sounds healthy. Medical decisions are Preston's now, remember? You signed. Victoria stood, smoothing her skirt. Good work, Cassandra. You did exactly what we needed you to do. Now rest. They wheeled Rose away. Cassandra caught one glimpse, dark hair, tiny fists waving, lungs working perfectly before the door closed. She made a sound she didn't recognize. Animal grief, primal and raw. Preston appeared in the doorway. Prove you're stable for 30 days, then we'll discuss visitation. He left. Cassandra was alone. For 3 days, they kept her in the recovery room. She could see the NICU through a window, could see Rose in her incubator, but couldn't touch her, couldn't hold her, couldn't feed her. She was allowed to watch for 1 hour each day. 60 minutes to stare through glass at her daughter while nurses who reported to Victoria fed her formula, changed her, soothed her when she cried. At night, Cassandra could hear Rose crying. The NICU was 2 rooms away, close enough that the sound carried, close enough to drive her slowly insane, lying in her bed, breasts aching with milk, listening to her baby scream for her. They pumped her full of medication to help you sleep and to manage your blood pressure, to stabilize your mood. She recognized only half the pills, took them anyway. What choice did she have? Preston visited every morning. Are you ready to be reasonable yet? On day 4, Cassandra nodded. Yes, whatever you want. Just let me see her. That's my girl. He stroked her hair like she was a dog. Sign the divorce papers and you can visit her twice a week. Victoria produced the documents. Cassandra signed without reading them. Full custody to Preston, no alimony, no claim to assets, no contact rights except at Preston's discretion. She signed it all. Good. Victoria collected the papers. You'll be moved to the guest cottage tomorrow. You may see Rose for 2 hours twice a week supervised. Follow the rules and perhaps we'll increase it in 6 months. Where's Marcus? My brother, is he in prison? Victoria's smile was cruel. Assaulting police officers during his arrest. He's looking at 5 years. No, you're lying. Am I? Victoria pulled up a video on her tablet. It showed Marcus in a prison cell. 2 guards entering, Marcus standing, defensive, hands up. Then the guards attacking, beating him with batons. Marcus curling on the floor, trying to protect his head, blood pooling beneath him. This is what happens to cop attackers in lockup, Preston said. Tragic, really. Stop! Cassandra screamed. Please, make them stop. Preston paused the video. I can make one phone call and this stops, but you need to do something for me first. What? Anything, just please. He produced another document. Final divorce decree. Sign right now and agree to never contact Rose after she's released from medical observation. No, I can't. She's my daughter. He played more video. The guards approaching Marcus again, batons raised. Cassandra grabbed the pen and signed. Preston smiled. Good girl. See how easy it is when you cooperate? He made a phone call. Stand down on the Morgan situation. For now. He hung up and showed Cassandra the video feed. The guards leaving Marcus's cell. Marcus alive, bloody, but alive, curled on the floor. You're free to leave the estate tomorrow, Preston said. Alone. They left her in the recovery room. Alone, broken, defeated. Eleanor found her at midnight, sitting on the floor, rocking back and forth, eyes vacant. Cassandra, can you hear me? But Cassandra was gone. Checked out. Her mind had finally cracked under the weight of everything she had lost. Eleanor held her and whispered, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. But sorry wouldn't bring back Cassandra's daughter. Sorry wouldn't free her brother. Sorry wouldn't undo 3 years of systematic destruction. Sorry was worthless. 3 weeks later, Cassandra existed in a gray haze of medication and grief. They had moved her to the guest cottage on the far edge of the estate property, a small building that had once housed visiting relatives, now converted into her prison. The cottage had 2 rooms, a bathroom, and bars on the windows. She was allowed to see Rose twice a week for exactly 2 hours, always supervised by Victoria. She would sit in the nursery while Victoria held her daughter, feeding her, cooing at her, playing mother. Say hello to Cassandra, Victoria would tell Rose, even though the baby was only 3 weeks old and couldn't understand. She's the woman who carried you. Isn't that nice of her? Cassandra would sit in the designated chair, hands in her lap, heavily medicated, trying not to cry. If she cried too much, Victoria would end the visit early. Unstable emotional responses, Victoria would note on her tablet. Unfit for extended contact. After each visit, Cassandra would return to the cottage and sleep for 14 hours. The medication made everything soft and distant. The grief became manageable when she couldn't quite remember why she was grieving. Preston's doctor, not Dr. Hayes, someone new, someone who specialized in psychiatric medication, adjusted her dosages weekly. You're making excellent progress, he would say, checking her vitals. Much calmer, much more compliant. Compliant, that was the goal. That was what they wanted. A compliant ghost who wouldn't fight for her daughter, who wouldn't make trouble, who would eventually disappear entirely and let them all forget she ever existed. The Whitmore Foundation. Annual gala arrived like an execution date. Victoria came to the cottage with Eleanor in tow, carrying a garment bag. You're expected to attend, Victoria said. Preston wants to show everyone how amicable the divorce was, how well you're handling everything. She unzipped the bag, a gray dress, simple, modest, forgettable. Get dressed, hair and makeup in 30 minutes. Cassandra stared at the dress. I don't want to go. That wasn't a request. Eleanor helped her dress with gentle hands. The older woman looked older somehow, like the past few weeks had aged her 5 years. Try to smile tonight, Eleanor said softly. Just get through it. Then you can come back here. Back to her cage. Back to her medication. Back to her nothing. Cassandra looked at herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back. 30 pounds lighter than before the pregnancy, hollow eyes, skin as pale as paper. A ghost. The gala was exactly as Cassandra remembered. 200 guests in evening wear, crystal chandeliers, orchestra playing, champagne fountains. Preston stood at the center of it all, commanding attention, his hand on Victoria's back. Victoria wore white, a cocktail dress that showed off her figure, diamonds at her throat, her blonde hair perfectly styled. And in her arms, Rose. Cassandra's daughter, dressed in a pink onesie with a bow in her dark hair, sleeping peacefully against Victoria's shoulder. Cassandra stood in the back of the ballroom, barely able to breathe. Preston took the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. The Whitmore Foundation continues its important work thanks to your generous support. Applause, smiles, self-congratulation. Tonight, I'm thrilled to make a personal announcement. Preston pulled Victoria close. I'm engaged to Victoria Sterling, who has been my rock during a difficult period, and I'd like to introduce our beautiful daughter, Rose Eleanor Whitmore. The crowd applauded louder. Cameras flashed. Victoria and I want to thank Cassandra Morgan for being so gracious during this transition. Preston gestured toward the back of the room where Cassandra stood frozen. She'll always be a part of Rose's life. Always family. The cameras turned toward her. People smiled sympathetically. Society whispered, I heard she had a breakdown. So sad. At least the baby's in good hands now. Preston's better off. That Sterling woman is much more suitable. Cassandra couldn't breathe, couldn't move, could only watch as Victoria kissed Preston, as the crowd cheered, as her daughter slept in another woman's arms. She managed to last another hour before slipping out a side door. No one noticed her leave. In the cottage that night, Cassandra sat on the edge of the bed with a bottle of pills in her hand. Anti-anxiety medication. 30 milligrams. 30 pills in the bottle. If she took them all, would it be enough? Would it end this cleanly? She thought about Marcus, beaten in a prison cell because of her. She thought about Rose growing up calling Victoria mommy. She thought about the next 60 years of her life, stretching out endlessly, gray and empty and meaningless. I'm sorry, Rose, she whispered. Mama tried. I'm so sorry. Her hand closed around the pill bottle. A knock at the door made her jump. Cassandra sat frozen. No one knocked. They just entered. This was their property, their cottage. She was just a temporary resident. The knock came again. Firm, insistent. She opened the door. A woman stood on the step, 40-something, dark hair pulled back, wearing a red dress that was completely wrong for the fall weather. Hello, Cassandra, the woman said. You don't know me, but I know everything about you. My name is Sarah Brennan. I'm with the FBI. She pulled out a badge. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent. And your brother Marcus asked me to tell you something. He's alive. The video was fake. And tomorrow we burn it all down. She pulled out her phone and played a video. Marcus, sitting in a safe house, unharmed. No bruises, no blood, no injuries. Hey, little sister, he said, looking directly at the camera. I need you to be strong one more time. Can you do that? Can you help me end this? Cassandra dropped the pill bottle. It clattered across the floor, pills scattering everywhere. How? She whispered. They said you were in prison. They showed me a deep fake video, advanced technology, very convincing, but completely fabricated. Sarah stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Marcus was never beaten. He was never even arrested. The police at that failed extraction, half of them were FBI agents. We released him into protective custody 2 hours later. But Victoria said, Victoria Sterling is very good at her job. She's been covering up corporate crimes for years, but she's not good enough to beat the FBI. Sarah sat down, pulling out a tablet. We've been building a RICO case against Preston and Graham Whitmore for 8 months. Wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, domestic violence, kidnapping, obstruction of justice. She showed Cassandra the evidence. Financial records, audio recordings, security camera footage, testimony from Eleanor, from Victor Sullivan. from Becca. Eleanor's been working with us for 2 weeks, Sarah said. She's been feeding us evidence from inside the house. Victor was never disbarred. That was a cover story we created to make Victoria think she'd won. Becca's nursing license was never in jeopardy. It was all theater. I don't understand. Why didn't you tell me? Because we needed Victoria to believe she had complete control. We needed her to get comfortable, to keep documenting her crimes, to keep thinking she was untouchable. Sarah leaned forward. We have everything, Cassandra, but we need your testimony to make it stick. Will you help us? Cassandra looked at the scattered pills on the floor. 2 minutes ago, she had been ready to end everything. Now, what do you need me to do? Tomorrow is the Foundation's charity brunch. 300 guests, media coverage, live stream for donors who couldn't attend in person. You're invited as family. Sarah showed her the invitation that had been delivered to the cottage earlier. We need you to tell the truth. In front of everyone, on camera. They'll stop me. Preston, Victoria, Graham. They'll never let me speak. They won't be able to stop you. We'll make sure of that. Sarah stood. I know you're scared. I know you're exhausted. But you're the only one who can do this. You're the one who survived it all. You're the one who know every detail of what they did. She held out her hand. Cassandra looked at it, looked at the pills scattered across the floor, looked at the photo of Rose she kept hidden under her pillow. She took Sarah's hand. Let's end this. They detoxed her from the medication over the next 12 hours. It was brutal, shaking, sweating, vomiting, her body rebelling against the sudden absence of chemicals it had come to depend on. Becca arrived at dawn with medical supplies monitoring her vitals, forcing her to drink water and electrolyte solution. You're doing great, Becca said, wiping sweat from Cassandra's forehead. Just a few more hours, then you'll be clear-headed for the first time in weeks. Eleanor came at 8 in the morning with clothes, not the gray dress they had given her before. A blue suit, tailored and professional, the kind of outfit a woman wore when she meant business. Let me help you, Eleanor said, her hands gentle as she helped Cassandra into the shower, supported her when her legs shook, dried her hair with infinite patience. Why are you helping me now? Cassandra asked. After everything? Eleanor's hands stilled. Because I heard my granddaughter crying last night, and I realized I'm letting it happen again. The cycle I swore would end with me. My husband abused me. I did nothing. My son abused you. I did nothing. If I don't stop it now, Rose will grow up watching her father abuse someone else, and the cycle continues forever. She cupped Cassandra's face in her hands. I can't undo what I've done, but I can help you now, if you'll let me. Cassandra nodded, tears streaming down her face. At 10 in the morning, Marcus called on video. He was in a different safe house, FBI agents visible in the background. You look better, he said, smiling. The meds are out of your system? Mostly. Good. Cass, what you're about to do is going to be hard. Preston's going to fight back. Victoria's going to try to discredit you. But you just stick to the truth. Tell them exactly what happened. We'll handle the rest. What if I freeze? What if I can't do it? Then think about Rose. Think about the next 18 years of her life, growing up thinking that man is a good father, thinking Victoria is her mother, thinking abuse is normal. Marcus's jaw tightened. You can do this. Morgan women don't quit. We rise. Their mother's words, the phrase she had said 1,000 times when they were children. Morgan women don't quit. We rise. I'll see you on the other side, Marcus said. Love you, little sister. Love you too. Sarah arrived at 11:30. Ready? Cassandra looked in the mirror one last time. Clear eyes, steady hands, the woman she used to be, finally visible again. Let's go. The charity brunch was set up in the mansion's garden, beneath a massive white tent that could seat 300 people. Morning sunlight filtered through the silk draping. Tables were set with crystal and silver. A stage at the front held a podium with the Whitmore Foundation logo. Cassandra arrived with Eleanor, both of them walking through the main entrance like they belonged there. Several guests did double takes, surprised to see Cassandra present and lucid instead of locked away in her cottage. Preston and Victoria sat at the head table, Rose in a carrier between them. Preston's face darkened when he saw Cassandra, But Victoria put a hand on his arm, calming him. Let her attend, Victoria said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Poor thing, let her feel included. It's the charitable thing to do. They took their seats. Cassandra had been placed at a back table, far from the stage. Exactly where they wanted her. Out of sight, out of mind. But Sarah Brennan was already in position. She stood near the soiree, dressed as catering staff, a wireless earpiece hidden beneath her hair. Around the perimeter, a dozen other FBI agents posed as servers, security, even guests. Graham took the stage first, welcoming everyone to the annual brunch, thanking them for their generous donations to the foundation. Then Preston spoke about the foundation's work, carefully avoiding any mention of the ongoing FBI investigation into the missing $17 million. He was smooth, practiced, completely convincing. And now, Preston said, I'd like to invite someone special to say a few words. My ex-wife, Cassandra Morgan, who has been so gracious during a difficult time. Cassandra? It was supposed to be a humiliation, parading her in front of society, making her give some brief, grateful speech about how well Preston was treating her, how amicable everything was. Victoria had written it herself, a 3-minute script about cooperation and putting Rose first and remaining friends. Cassandra walked to the stage, holding the speech Victoria had given her. She reached the podium. 300 faces looked up at her, cameras from the live stream focused on her face. Preston sat at the head table confident. Victoria smiled like a shark. Cassandra set the written speech down on the podium, then she pushed it aside. Thank you for being here, she said. Her voice was quiet at first, tentative. I'm supposed to tell you how wonderful the Whitmore Foundation is. How grateful I am for Preston's kindness during our divorce. How excited I am for his future with Victoria. She paused, looking directly at Preston. Instead, I'm going to tell you the truth. Preston started to stand. Victoria grabbed his arm, hissing something urgent. 3 years ago, I married Preston Whitmore thinking I was marrying a good man. Within 6 months, he broke my ribs. Within a year, he gave me a concussion. Within 2 years, he had systematically isolated me from everyone I loved and convinced me I deserved the abuse. Gasped from the audience, cameras still rolling. And when I became pregnant with our daughter Rose, it got worse. She pulled out her phone, connected it to the presentation screen behind her. Security footage appeared. Night vision, Preston dragging her up the marble staircase by her hair. The audience watched in horror as he released her at the top and she tumbled down, pregnant belly exposed, trying desperately to protect her baby. This happened 3 weeks before Rose was born, Cassandra said. Her voice was stronger now. This is what my husband did when I asked if I could see my best friend. More footage. Preston slapping her, choking her, shoving her against walls. This is systematic abuse, enabled and protected by every person at that head table. Audio recordings played next. Preston's threats, Graham instructing Victoria to cover up financial crimes, Eleanor advising Preston to manage his wife better. And this, Cassandra said, pulling up financial documents, is $43 million embezzled from your donations, not $17 million. $43 million, hidden in offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, managed by Victoria Sterling, who has been obstructing the FBI investigation for over a year. Victoria stood up, face red. This is slander. You have no proof. Then explain why FBI agents are surrounding this tent right now. The tent flaps opened. Sarah Brennan walked in, flanked with 20 federal agents and FBI windbreakers. They moved to positions around the perimeter, blocking all exits. Preston Whitmore, Sarah said, pulling out handcuffs. You're under arrest for wire fraud, racketeering, domestic assault, kidnapping, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Preston tried to run. He actually tried to run, knocking over his chair, heading for the back of the tent. A figure stepped into his path. Marcus Morgan, no longer pretending to be Mike Turner, dressed in FBI gear, his face hard as stone. Preston threw a punch. Marcus dodged it easily, years of SEAL training making it look effortless. He grabbed Preston's arm, twisted it behind his back, forced him to the ground in 3 efficient moves. That's for my sister, Marcus said, locking Papa's cuffs around Preston's wrists. You son of a bitch. Victoria tried to slip away during the chaos, holding Rose in her carrier. Cassandra ran across the tent, blocking her path. Not my daughter. She's not yours anymore, Victoria hissed. The custody agreement was signed under duress, invalid. Cassandra stepped closer. And Rose was never Preston's biological daughter anyway. The words landed like a bomb. Victoria's face went white. What? The paternity test Graham showed me. I finally got to see the real results last night. Cassandra pulled out the actual lab report, the one Eleanor had stolen from Graham's safe. Rose has 0 Whitmore DNA. She's from my previous relationship. Preston isn't her father. Victoria stared at the document, her perfect composure finally cracking. Everything you've done for the past year, Cassandra continued, destroying my life, securing your position as future Mrs. Whitmore, bonding with what you thought was your stepdaughter. It was all for a child who has no connection to this family. You're lying. Ask Graham. He's known for months. He just didn't tell you. Cassandra leaned closer. He used you. He let you destroy me for a baby that was never even a Whitmore heir. Victoria's hands shook. She looked across the tent at Graham, who was being read his rights by another FBI agent. He didn't even look at her. Victoria screamed in rage and lunged at Cassandra. They went down hard, fighting. 2 women who had been playing chess for months finally going to war. Cassandra fought back for the first time in 3 years. Every punch, every desperate grab, all the rage she had swallowed, all the fear she had buried, it erupted in that moment. She won. FBI agents pulled them apart, but Cassandra had won. Victoria Sterling, Sarah said, handcuffing her, you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and accessory to kidnapping and domestic abuse. Victoria was screaming obscenities as they dragged her away, all her polish and professionalism gone, revealing the vicious person underneath. Eleanor approached Cassandra slowly, hands raised like approaching a wild animal. I have additional evidence, she said to Sarah. 40 years of documentation, financial records, personal journals, everything. Mrs. Whitmore, you're our star witness. We need you on the outside, not arrested. Eleanor turned to Cassandra. I don't deserve forgiveness. I don't deserve your grace. But I will spend the rest of my life trying to earn it. For you and for Rose. Cassandra took Rose from the FBI agent who had taken her from Victoria. She held her daughter for the first time without supervision, without time limits, without Victoria's poisonous presence. Rose looked up at her with dark eyes, Cassandra's eyes, and made a small cooing sound. Hi, baby girl, Cassandra whispered. It's Mama. I've got you, Al. I've got you. Marcus appeared beside her, his arm around her shoulders. Becca was there too, crying happy tears. You did it, Becca said. Cass, you actually did it. We did it, Cassandra corrected. All of us. Across the tent, Preston was being led away in handcuffs, shouting threats and denials. Victoria was screaming. Graham walked with cold dignity, his face impassive even in defeat. Camera crews caught everything. The live stream broadcast it all to thousands of foundation donors. By evening, it would be national news. By morning, it would be international. The Whitmore empire was burning to the ground, and Cassandra stood in the ashes, holding her daughter, surrounded by the people who had saved her. Finally free, the courtroom was packed for the sentencing hearing. Cassandra sat in the front row, Marcus on one side, Becca on the other. Eleanor sat behind them, hands clasped in her lap. Rose was with a babysitter. Cassandra refused to bring her daughter anywhere near this courthouse. Preston sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his expensive suits and custom cufflinks replaced by prison attire. He had aged 10 years in the 12 months since his arrest. His lawyer looked exhausted. They had tried everything, plea bargains, appeals, technicalities, and failed at every turn. The federal prosecutor stood. Your Honor, the United States recommends 25 years in federal prison for the defendant. The evidence shows a pattern of systematic abuse, financial crimes totaling $43 million, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Preston's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client has no prior criminal record. He's willing to make restitution with money he stole from charitable donations. The judge looked over her glasses. Sit down, counselor. The judge reviewed her notes. Preston Whitmore III, you have been found guilty of 19 counts of wire fraud, racketeering, domestic assault, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. The evidence presented at trial showed a man who believed his wealth and family name placed him above the law. She looked directly at Preston. You were wrong. 25 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole. Restitution of $43 million to the Whitmore Foundation to be distributed to the charitable causes you defrauded. Additionally, all parental rights are hereby terminated. You will have no contact with the child known as Rose Eleanor Morgan. Preston's face crumpled. For the first time, Cassandra saw real emotion from him. Not rage, not control, just loss. Too late. Much too late. Victoria's sentencing came next. She sat ramrod straight, still trying to project confidence, even in her prison jumpsuit. Victoria Sterling, the judge said, you were an officer of the court, an attorney sworn to uphold the law. Instead, you became the architect of a conspiracy that destroyed lives and corrupted justice itself. 15 years in federal prison, disbarment, restitution of your legal fees, which were paid with stolen funds. Victoria didn't cry, didn't break. She simply stood when the marshals came for her, walking out with her chin high. Cassandra didn't feel victorious watching her go. She just felt tired. Graham Whitmore had died of a heart attack 3 months before trial. Massive coronary, alone in his cell, 2 in the morning. He had escaped earthly justice. But Eleanor had testified anyway, spending 8 hours on the stand detailing 40 years of enablement and abuse. I knew what my husband was, she had said, tears streaming down her face. I knew what my son was becoming. And I did nothing. I prioritized family reputation over human decency, over my daughter-in-law's safety, over my granddaughter's well-being. The prosecutor had been gentle with her. Mrs. Whitmore, you eventually came forward. You provided crucial evidence. Because I finally understood that protecting monsters makes you monstrous too. Eleanor wasn't charged. She had immunity in exchange for her testimony, but she lost everything anyway. The mansion was seized as part of the restitution. Her social circle evaporated. Her friends, her clubs, her entire life gone. She downsized to a small apartment in Hartford. Got a job at a nonprofit serving domestic violence survivors. Spent her days trying to help other women escape the same situation she had enabled. She sent Cassandra letters, asked for nothing, just said she was sorry over and over, in different words. Cassandra didn't respond, not yet. Maybe someday, but not yet. Dr. Patricia Hayes lost her medical license and served 3 years in prison for her role in the conspiracy. Falsifying medical records, performing procedures without consent, enabling kidnapping. I thought I was helping a powerful family, she had testified. I didn't think about the woman I was hurting. I'm ashamed. Too little, too late. Victor Sullivan became something of a hero in legal circles. The attorney who took down the powerful Whitmore family, who worked with the FBI for months, who risked his career to do the right thing. He offered to represent Cassandra in the civil lawsuit against the Whitmore estate. She accepted. The settlement was $50 million. Cassandra donated $40 million of it to domestic violence organizations and women's shelters. Kept $10 million for herself and Rose. It was more money than she had ever imagined having, more than she needed, but it bought something precious. Security. She would never be trapped again, never be dependent on a man's money, never be helpless. Marcus returned to civilian life. He left the Navy SEALs honorably discharged after 12 years of service. He said he needed to be near his sister and his niece. He bought an apartment in the same building as Cassandra, 2 floors down, close enough to help, far enough to give her space. He went back to school, got his teaching credential, taught history at a local high school. The kids loved him. Mr. M, who had been a real Navy SEAL and told the best stories. He came to dinner every Sunday, babysat Rose when Cassandra needed a break, taught his niece to throw a baseball when she got old enough. He never said, I told you so. Never made Cassandra feel guilty for not leaving sooner. Just loved her and supported her and showed up. That was what family really meant. Becca finished her nursing degree and took a job at a hospital specializing in trauma care. She saw survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and other horrors every day. She was good at it, gentle but firm, understanding but practical. She and Cassandra remained best friends. Coffee every Saturday morning, text messages daily, shared babysitting when Becca's daughter needed a playmate. I should have done more, Becca said once, about 2 years after the trial. I should have forced you to leave. You can't force someone to leave, Cassandra replied. I had to choose it myself. You gave me the tools. That's all anyone can do. The 1-year anniversary of Rose's birth arrived. Cassandra threw a small party. Marcus, Becca, and her daughter, Victor Sullivan, Sarah Brennan, and her husband. A handful of other friends Cassandra had slowly, carefully allowed back into her life. No mansion, no crystal chandelier, just Cassandra's small apartment, decorated with balloons and a homemade cake. Rose toddled around on chubby legs, laughing, grabbing at decorations, completely oblivious to the darkness she had been born into. She's beautiful, Sarah said, watching Rose try to eat wrapping paper, and completely untraumatized. You did good, Cassandra. I'm trying. That's all any of us can do. Cassandra cut the cake, served the slices, watched her daughter smear frosting everywhere. This was happiness, small and quiet and real. No staff, no expectations, no performance. Just people who loved her, in a home she chose, with a daughter she would protect with her life. But recovery wasn't linear. Cassandra had PTSD, official diagnosis from the therapist she saw twice a week, nightmares about the staircase, panic attacks when someone raised their voice, hypervigilance about locked doors and windows. She checked the locks 3 times before bed, every night. Marcus told her she didn't need to. She had a state-of-the-art security system, but she couldn't help it. The first time a date grabbed her arm affectionately, she flinched so hard she almost screamed. She apologized, tried to explain, watched him process what that meant about her past. He didn't call again. She stopped trying to date after that, maybe someday, but not yet. 2 years after Preston's conviction, an envelope arrived at Cassandra's apartment. Prison mail. Victoria Sterling's handwriting on the outside. Cassandra almost threw it away without opening it. Marcus told her she should, but curiosity won. Inside, a single page covered in Victoria's precise script. I'll be out in 12 years. You took everything from me. My career, my freedom, my future with Preston. I lost everything because of you. When I get out, I'm coming for Rose. She should have been mine. She was supposed to be mine. I will find a way to take her from you. Cassandra read it 3 times. Then she walked to her fireplace, struck a match, and burned the letter. She watched it curl and blacken, watched Victoria's threats turn to ash. Then she picked up her phone and called her lawyer. I need to file a restraining order for when Victoria Sterling is released from prison, and I need to update my security protocols. After that, she made hot chocolate and sat with Rose, reading bedtime stories, feeling her daughter's warm weight against her side. Let Victoria come. Cassandra wasn't the same broken woman who had signed those custody papers, wasn't the same terrified victim who had been locked in a bedroom. She had survived the staircase, survived the cage, survived systematic psychological destruction, and came out the other side. If Victoria wanted a fight in 12 years, she would get one. But Cassandra would be ready. The nightmares continued. Some nights Cassandra woke up screaming, certain she heard Preston's footsteps in the hallway. Marcus would come running from his apartment, finding her sitting on the floor, checking locks, breathing through a panic attack. He's in prison, Marcus would remind her gently. He can't hurt you. You're safe. I know, I know. Some trauma you never fully heal from. You just learn to live with it, learn to function despite it, learn to build a new life on top of the ruins of the old one. Cassandra learned. She went back to teaching kindergarten, found a job at a small private school that valued gentle, patient teachers. The kids adored her. Parents requested her specifically. She really understands kids, they would say. She's so good with the shy ones, the scared ones. Cassandra knew what it was like to be afraid, to fall by enough bomb, to feel powerless. to need someone to see you and protect you. She made sure every child in her classroom felt safe. Rose's third birthday arrived. Cassandra baked cupcakes, hung streamers, invited Rose's little friends from daycare. Marcus brought presents. Becca brought party games. Eleanor sent a card. She always sent cards, though she never asked to visit. Rose opened her presents with the chaotic joy of a toddler. A toy kitchen, picture books, stuffed animals. Mama, look! Rose held up a plush bunny. Bunny? I see, baby. What should we name her? Hope. Cassandra's throat tightened. Hope. That's a beautiful name. That night after the party, after Rose was asleep, Cassandra sat on her couch with a glass of wine and the photo album she had started. Rose's first smile, Rose's first steps, Rose's first word. Not a single photo included Preston. Not one memory of the Whitmore mansion. This was Rose's real childhood, safe and loved and free. Cassandra turned to the front of the album where she had placed one other photo. Her mother, her father. Marcus and Cassandra as children, smiling in front of their childhood home. We made it, Mom, Cassandra whispered. We survived. We're okay. Morgan women don't quit. We rise. 5 years after the trial, Cassandra received an unexpected phone call. Ms. Morgan, this is Rebecca Chen from the documentary production company. We're doing a piece on the Whitmore case for a streaming service. We'd like to interview you. Cassandra's first instinct was to say no. She had turned down dozens of media requests over the years. Talk shows, podcasts, book deals. She didn't want to be the poster child for domestic violence survival. But this felt different. What angle are you taking? She asked. We want to tell the full story, not just the dramatic arrest, but the years before, the systematic isolation, the psychological warfare, how hard it is to leave, how the system fails victims. Rebecca paused. And how sometimes, with the right support, people can escape and rebuild. I'll think about it. She called Marcus, called Becca, called her therapist. It might help other women, her therapist said. Seeing that escape is possible, that you can survive and rebuild. Or it might re-traumatize you, Marcus countered. You don't owe anyone your story. What do you think? Cassandra asked Becca. I think you'll know the right answer. You always do, eventually. Cassandra thought about all the women still trapped, still believing they deserved the abuse, still thinking no one would help them. She called Rebecca back. I'll do it, but on my terms. The documentary took 8 months to film. They interviewed Cassandra, Marcus, Becca, Victor, Sarah, even Eleanor. The cameras followed Cassandra through her current life, teaching kindergarten, parenting Rose, therapy sessions, support group meetings. They showed the mansion where she had been imprisoned, now seized by the government and sitting empty. They showed the cottage where she had almost died. They showed the courtroom where she had testified, but they also showed her new apartment. Rose's bedroom, full of toys and laughter, the school where Cassandra taught, the community she had built. The contrast was stark. Prison to freedom, death to life. The hardest part was the interview about the staircase. Can you tell us what happened in that night? Rebecca asked gently. Cassandra closed her eyes, forcing herself back to that moment. Preston was angry about something, I don't even remember what. I said the wrong thing, or I looked at him wrong, or I existed wrong. It didn't take much. He grabbed my hair. I was 7 months pregnant. I tried to protect my belly, but he just kept pulling, dragging me up the stairs. I was screaming. No one came. At the top, he let go. I fell. All the way down, 23 steps. I thought I was going to die. I thought Rose was going to die. Her voice broke. She took a moment, breathing through it. When I landed, I just curled around my belly and prayed. Prayed she was still alive. That's all that mattered. Not me. Just her. And when you felt her kick? Relief, pure relief. I could survive anything as long as she was okay. The camera captured everything. Her tears, her trembling hands, the way she unconsciously pressed her palm to her stomach, even though Rose wasn't inside her anymore. Raw, honest, devastating. The documentary premiered at a film festival, won awards, got picked up by a major streaming service. Within a week, it had 10 million views. Cassandra's inbox flooded with messages. Thank you for sharing your story. I finally left. I've been making excuses for my husband for 3 years. Your documentary made me realize I'm not crazy. I'm a police officer. After watching this, I'm changing how I respond to domestic violence calls. I'm a lawyer. I'm starting a pro bono program for abuse survivors. I'm in college studying to be a therapist. Your story changed what I want to do with my life. Cassandra read every message, cried over some of them, felt the weight of all those women, all those survivors, all those people still fighting. She started a nonprofit, the Morgan Foundation, dedicated to helping domestic violence survivors escape and rebuild. Legal aid, safe housing, therapy, job training. Eleanor donated her entire inheritance to fund it. It's the least I can do, Eleanor said when they met to sign the papers. I have spent 5 years trying to make amends. This is a start. Cassandra looked at the woman who had once enabled her abuse, who had stood by and done nothing while her son tortured his wife. Eleanor looked older, grayer, smaller somehow. The weight of guilt had diminished her. Thank you, Cassandra said. This will help a lot of people. May I ask? Eleanor hesitated. How is Rose? Cassandra pulled out her phone, showing a recent photo. Rose at age 6, gap-toothed and grinning, holding a trophy from her soccer team. She's thriving, happy, completely unaware of where she came from. Does she ask about her father? Sometimes. I tell her that her father wasn't able to be in her life, but she has Uncle Marcus and Aunt Becca and a whole community of people who love her. Cassandra put the phone away. She doesn't need the whole truth yet. Maybe when she's older, maybe never. I'll let her decide. And you? Eleanor asked quietly. How are you? Some days are hard. I still have nightmares. Still check the locks 3 times. Still flinch when someone moves too fast. Cassandra met her eyes. But I'm here. I'm alive. I'm free. That's more than I ever thought I'd have. Rose's 7th birthday party was at the park. Cassandra had invited her entire first-grade class, plus neighbors, plus the community of friends she had slowly rebuilt. Marcus manned the grill, making hot dogs and hamburgers. Becca organized relay races. Rose shrieked with laughter, running with her friends, completely carefree. A woman approached Cassandra hesitantly. Excuse me? Are you Cassandra Morgan? Cassandra tensed. She got recognized sometimes now, after the documentary. Usually it was fine. Sometimes it wasn't. I am. I just wanted to say thank you. I watched your documentary 3 months ago. I left my husband the next day. Your story gave me the courage. The woman's eyes filled with tears. I have my 2 kids now. We're safe. We're free because you were brave enough to speak up. Cassandra hugged her. You were already brave. You just needed permission to act on it. I'm so glad you're safe. The woman left, wiping her eyes, watching her own children play with Rose's friends. Marcus appeared beside Cassandra. You okay? Yeah, better than okay. She watched Rose, who was now covered in grass stains and cake frosting, playing tag with 6 other kids. Look at her, Marcus. She's so happy. You did that. You gave her that life. We did that, all of us. Cassandra leaned against her brother. I couldn't have survived without you. You were surviving before I got there. I just helped you finish the job. That night after the party, after Rose was bathed and read to and tucked into bed, Cassandra sat on her apartment balcony with a cup of tea. Her phone buzzed, a news alert. Victoria Sterling granted early release for good behavior. Former Whitmore attorney to be released from federal prison next month after serving 10 years of 15-year sentence. Cassandra's hands tightened on her mug. She had known this was coming. The restraining order was already in place. Her security system was updated. Her lawyer was on standby. But knowing and feeling were different things. Marcus called within 5 minutes. You saw? Yeah. Want me to come over? No, I'm okay, really. Cass, Marcus, I mean it. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. I'm not scared anymore. If Victoria wants to try something, let her try. I'll be ready. She heard him exhale. Okay, but I'm 1 call away anytime. I know, love you. Love you too. After hanging up, Cassandra sat for a long time looking out at the city lights. Victoria would be released next month. Let her come. Cassandra had built a life, had raised a daughter, had helped hundreds of other women escape their own prisons, had turned her trauma into purpose. Victoria had spent 10 years in a cell, losing everything, festering in bitterness and rage. Who had really won? Cassandra finished her tea, checked the locks one more time, and went to bed. In Rose's room, her daughter slept peacefully, arms wrapped around the stuffed bunny named Hope. Cassandra kissed her forehead gently. Sweet dreams, baby girl. Mama's got you. Always. She went to her own room, climbed into bed, and fell asleep without nightmares for the first time in years. The staircase was behind her. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but full of possibility. And Cassandra Morgan was ready for whatever came next.